The wind howled down Baker Street like a banshee denied its prize, rattling the window panes with a ferocity that would have unsettled lesser men. But inside the warm sanctuary of 56B, a man of singular intellect sat undisturbed. Welcome to Whisper Theory. Tonight we begin a tale of snow, secrets, and a jewel that carries a curse. This is chapter 1 of the mystery of the Hawthorne Wreath. Hercu Puro sat in his favorite armchair, his legs crossed with absolute precision. In one hand he balanced a cup of thick, dark chocolate. The fire crackled in the grate, casting golden flickers across a room where order reigned supreme. Every book was aligned. Every cushion was plumped to geometric perfection. Outside, London lay buried beneath a reluctant dusting of snow. To Puro, Christmas was a season of sentimentality best observed from a safe distance. He had no family to oblige him, no children to demand his presence beneath a gaudy tree. His festivities were intellectual, a well-chosen novel, perhaps a new monograph on the criminal mind, and the quiet satisfaction of his own company. He had resolved that this year would be one of perfect solitude. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. The doorbell rang, a single, imperious sound that shattered the silence. Puro's famous mustache twitched in mild irritation. He set his cup down with a click that spoke volumes. George, his valet, appeared with the silent efficiency of a well-oiled machine, extending a silver tray. "A telegram, sir," George murmured. "Marked urgent." Puro raised an eyebrow. He sliced open the envelope with a letter opener shaped like a miniature sword. The message was brief, yet it carried the weight of a thunderclap. "Monsieur Puro, stop. Willowbrook Manor, Oxfordshire, stop. Christmas Eve gathering, stop. Your presence requested, stop. A matter of delicacy, stop. Lady Evelyn Hawthorne." Puro read it twice. Lady Evelyn Hawthorne. The name stirred memories like sediment in a shaken wine glass. He remembered a charity gala in Brussels, emerald silk, and a mind as sharp as cut glass. Her husband had died under clouded circumstances, whispers of debts and indiscretions. Now she had retreated to the country, emerging only rarely. And suddenly she was summoning Hercu Puro for Christmas. "George," Puro said, folding the yellow paper with care, "it appears I am to be deprived of my solitude." "Very good, sir," George replied, betraying no surprise. "Shall I prepare the traveling case?" "Oui. The gray wolf suit, the fur-lined coat, and the new muffler, the burgundy one. One must be prepared for the English countryside." Puro moved to the window. The snow was falling in earnest now, fat flakes drifting past the gas lamps like confetti at a funeral. Willowbrook Manor. He knew it by reputation. A sprawling Elizabethan pile surrounded by a moat, said to be beautiful in summer and haunted in winter. The telegram had mentioned a matter of delicacy. In Puro's vast experience, delicacy was merely a polite euphemism for disaster wearing its Sunday best. Just then the telephone rang, shrill and demanding. It was Miss Felicity Frost, Lady Evelyn's secretary. Her voice was cultured, but beneath the polish lay a tremor of urgency. "The train departs from Paddington at 11:30 tomorrow," she said breathlessly. "Lady Evelyn is insistent. It is the heirloom, Monsieur Puro, the Hawthorne Wreath. It is to be unveiled at midnight on Christmas Eve. But there have been irregularities. Puro's eyes narrowed. Irregularities, a delightful word. Tell me, mademoiselle, Puro interrupted gently. Is it a theft, a forgery, or perhaps a murder? There was a silence on the line so long Puro thought the connection had died. Finally, Miss Frost whispered, "Nothing so dramatic, monsieur. Not yet, but the wreath is the centerpiece, and Lady Evelyn insists that nothing must go wrong." Puro hung up the phone and stared into the fire. A house full of relatives, centuries of grudges, and a priceless jewel. The game was afoot. But as Puro packed his small revolver, he couldn't shake the feeling that this Christmas, the snow would be stained with something far darker than wine. As the train from Paddington thundered westward, Hercu Puro occupied a first-class compartment alone. The landscape outside slid past in a blur of frost-laced fields and skeletal hedgerows. The snow was falling in earnest now, each flake a tiny assassin sent to bury the world. Puro tolerated the train with stoicism. He had solved 3 clues of his crossword puzzle when the door slid open. The conductor, a man with a mustache that tragically aspired to Puro's own, punched his ticket. "Oxford, sir?" the conductor asked. "You'll be met, I hope. Lady Hawthorne's man is never late, but the roads are treacherous." The mention of Lady Hawthorne's man stirred a memory. Puro made a mental note to observe the driver closely. When the train hissed to a halt at Oxford Station, the cold hit Puro like a slap. A man detached himself from the shadows, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a chauffeur's livery of dark green. "Monsieur Puro," the man said, his voice like gravel wrapped in velvet. "Name's Briggs. Lady Hawthorne sent me." The car was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, black paint glistening like a seal's hide. As they glided through the snow-choked lanes, Puro watched Briggs in the rearview mirror. "You have been with Lady Hawthorne long, Briggs." 10 years, sir. The manor is isolated, like a ship in a bottle. But the house is warm." Briggs paused, his eyes meeting Puro's in the mirror. "You'll find the family is already gathered, a lively bunch." "Lively," Puro murmured. "Tell me of this Hawthorne wreath." "You have seen it." "Once or twice," Briggs replied, his voice tightening. "It's kept in the safe. Beautiful thing, but it gives me the creeps. All those jewels staring out like eyes." Puro filed this away. "Eyes that see much, perhaps." The car crested a hill, and Willowbrook Manor appeared below them. It was a vision from a fairy tale gone slightly awry, vast, half-timbered and encircled by a frozen moat. Smoke curled from a dozen chimneys, but the house seemed to crouch in the snow, waiting. They were met at the door by Miss Felicity Frost, the secretary Puro had spoken to. She ushered him into a great hall that smelled of pine and beeswax. A fire roared in a hearth large enough to roast an ox. And there, descending the grand staircase like a queen granting an audience, was Lady Evelyn Hawthorne. "Hercu," she exclaimed, extending her hands. "You came, I knew you would." "Madame," Puro bowed. "When Lady Evelyn commands, even the snow obeys." She laughed, but the sound was brittle. "Come, let me introduce you." The others are in the drawing room, arguing over charades. As they moved through the hall, Puro's sharp eyes missed nothing. The lavish decorations, the garlands of holly, the massive Christmas tree. But his attention was drawn to a single, empty pedestal near the foot of the stairs. A brass plaque read, The Hawthorne Wreath, unveiled Christmas Eve. Soon, Lady Evelyn whispered, following his gaze. Midnight tomorrow. A tradition my grandfather started. But tell me, Puro, you are here to ensure its safety. I am here because I was invited, Puro replied diplomatically. But if there is a mystery, it will be unraveled. They entered the drawing room, a cavernous space filled with tapestries and tension. A dozen people turned to stare. Lady Evelyn rattled off the names. Julian Hawthorne, the nephew, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Clarissa, the niece, with a gaze sharp as a stiletto. Felix Lang, the flashy American cousin. And Captain Hargreaves, a man leaning on a cane with a face like a map of old battles. Puro bowed to the room, but he felt the currents beneath the surface. Julian's hand trembled. Clarissa glared at the empty pedestal. Captain Hargreaves smelled faintly of brandy. "You'll find we are a civilized lot, monsieur," Clarissa said, her voice cool. "No poison in the pudding yet." Puro chuckled, but as he accepted a glass of mulled wine, he looked toward the window. The snow was drifting high against the panes, sealing them in. Somewhere in this house, a wreath waited, glittering with secrets. And somewhere among these smiling faces, a shadow lurked. The game had truly begun. The dining hall of Willowbrook Manor was a cathedral of oak and candlelight. A single long table stretched the length of the room, set for 14. At the center, beneath a chandelier dripping with ivy, stood the empty pedestal, waiting for the Hawthorne Wreath. Hercu Puro entered precisely at 8. He surveyed the tableau with the satisfaction of a conductor about to raise his baton. The guests were seated, a living portrait of anticipation and nerves. Lady Evelyn presided at the head, regal in midnight blue velvet. To her right sat Julian Hawthorne, drumming his fingers on the tablecloth. To her left was Clarissa, toying with a pearl earring. Felix Lang, the American, lounged opposite Puro, his grin a fraction too wide. The conversation began in fits and starts. Puro sipped his consommé, listening not just to the words but to the silence between them. He noticed how Julian's eyes flicked to the pedestal whenever the word wreath was mentioned. He saw how Clarissa's knuckles whitened when Felix laughed too loudly. "Tell me, Lady Evelyn," Puro said, his voice pitching perfectly to cut through the chatter. "This tradition of the wreath, how did it begin?" The table went quiet. Lady Evelyn set down her spoon. "My great-grandfather acquired it in 1843, she said. It was said to have adorned the bridal crown of Catherine of Aragon. He won it in a card game. He decreed it should be displayed every Christmas Eve as a reminder of fortune's fickleness." "Fickleness," Puro repeated, "a quality much in evidence at card games." "No," Felix Lang laughed. "Sounds like my kind of guy, though I'd have sold it and bought a yacht." Julian's jaw tightened. "Some things are worth more than money, cousin." "Name one," Felix shot back. Clarissa leaned forward, her voice silk over steel. "Legacy, perhaps, or the satisfaction of knowing your descendants will squabble over your corpse." A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the room. Captain Hargreaves slammed his hand on the table, rattling the crystal. "Enough. This is Christmas, not a blasted wake." Lady Evelyn lifted a hand and silence fell like a guillotine. "Peace, Captain. We are all friends here, or at least we pretend to be." As the courses continued, roast goose, glazed carrots, flaming Christmas pudding, Poirot turned his attention to Miss Frost, the secretary. She had barely touched her food. "You are not hungry, mademoiselle?" Poirot asked softly. She started, looking terrified. The preparations have been taxing." "Tell me," Poirot murmured. "The wreath, it is insured." "Of course," she whispered. "For a fortune, but Lady Evelyn would never part with it willingly." Poirot filed that word away, willingly. The dinner concluded with coffee served in delicate cups. Lady Evelyn rose to offer a toast. "To absent friends," she said, "and to the wreath, which binds us whether we wish it or not." Glasses clinked. But Poirot noticed that while Julian stood to toast, his other hand was clenched in a fist. As the party broke up, drifting toward the drawing-room for cards, Poirot slipped back into the hall. He approached the pedestal. Behind a tapestry of St. George slaying a dragon lay the modern wall safe. He ran a gloved finger along the velvet cloth of the pedestal. There, lying on the fabric, was a single strand of holly berry. It was crushed, its juice staining the velvet like fresh blood. "Curious," Poirot murmured. "Couldn't sleep either, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot turned to find Clarissa standing behind him, smoking a cigarette in a long ebony holder. "That pedestal," she said, exhaling smoke. "It's been the center of every argument since I was a child. Who gets the wreath? Who deserves it?" She stepped closer, her eyes dark. "You're here because something is wrong, aren't you? Aunt Evelyn didn't invite the great Hercu Puro for the mince pies." "Let us say," Poirot replied, "I am insurance against irregularities." Clarissa laughed, a sound without mirth. "Then you'll earn your fee. Midnight tomorrow is the unveiling, and God help anyone who stands between that wreath and its rightful owner." She walked away, leaving Poirot alone in the dim hall. He looked at the crushed berry again. The seeds of discord had been sown, and tomorrow the harvest would begin. The grandfather clock struck 3, echoing through the silent corridors of Willowbrook Manor. Hercu Puro sat in his room, fully dressed in a dark silk dressing gown. The house was not asleep. It was merely holding its breath. Poirot opened his small leather notebook. He began to write with a fountain pen filled with green ink. Observations: pedestal candle guttering, crushed holly berry fresh juice. Briggs left his post for 19 minutes. Miss Frost left the table for 8 minutes. He closed the book and stepped out into the corridor. The gas lamps were turned low. He moved silently toward the library, the heart of the mystery. On the way, he encountered Miss Frost, emerging from the shadows in a dressing gown, carrying an oil lamp. She froze when she saw him. "Monsieur Poirot, I couldn't sleep, the accounts." "At 3 in the morning?" Poirot asked gently. "Come, mademoiselle, walk with me." They descended to the conservatory. Moonlight filtered through the glass roof, turning the snow outside into a silver sea. Miss Frost shivered. "It's not the accounts," she confessed. "It's the wreath." Lady Evelyn received an anonymous letter. It said the wreath would be stolen before the unveiling. That blood would crown the holly. And this letter burned. But I'm frightened. And this morning the holly garland above the library door was torn. Berries scattered like gunshot. Poirot knelt and found another crushed berry on the floor. A trail. Someone was marking territory. He sent Miss Frost back to her room and entered the library alone. It was a cavern of leather and vellum. The fire was banked low. Puro's eyes swept the room, the chess table, the globe, the tapestry hiding the safe. He crossed to the tapestry. He leaned in to listen to the safe mechanism. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked behind him. Puro whirled around. A figure lunged from the shadows, something glinting in its hand. Puro twisted, years of reflex saving him. A letter opener slashed through the air where his chest had been and embedded itself in the tapestry with a thud. The attacker was masked in black silk. Before Puro could grapple with him, the door burst open. Briggs, the chauffeur, rushed in, seizing the assailant and hurling him against the bookshelves. "Got you," Briggs growled. He ripped the mask away. Beneath it was Julian Hawthorne, disheveled and wild-eyed. "Julian!" Lady Evelyn's voice cut through the chaos as she appeared in the doorway, flanked by Clarissa and Felix. Julian struggled in Briggs's grip. "Let go." "I thought it was a burglar. I heard footsteps." "In a mask," Clarissa drawled, leaning against the doorframe. "With a weapon." "Really, Julian?" Puro retrieved the letter opener. "No blood, thankfully. But, Monsieur Julian, you have a peculiar way of greeting visitors." "I was investigating," Julian shouted, his face flushing crimson. "Enough," Puro said quietly, yet his voice commanded the room. "Briggs, take Monsieur Julian to his room. Guard the door." As the family dispersed, muttering and casting suspicious glances, Puro remained in the library. He examined the tapestry. The letter opener had sliced through the image of St. George's dragon, but beneath it on the brass of the safe dial was a faint, fresh scratch. Someone had been here before Julian's melodramatic entrance. Julian was a distraction, a clumsy pawn. Puro returned to his room as dawn threatened the sky. He added a new line to his notebook: Julian's mask, monogrammed JH, or planted. The wreath was still in the safe, but the thief had tested the defenses. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. The wreath would be unveiled at midnight. And Puro knew with absolute certainty that someone intended to ensure that unveiling never happened. Christmas Eve dawned with a hush so complete it felt like the aftermath of a scream. Snow had piled against the windows of Willowbrook Manor, turning the house into a glowing lantern in a white void. Puro received 3 anonymous letters with his morning coffee. "You have been warned. The wreath leaves tonight." The paper smelled faintly of coal tar soap, the kind used in the servants' quarters. At 10 a.m., Puro assembled the household in the library. He demanded the safe be opened to verify the wreath's presence. Lady Evelyn spun the dial. Her birthday, 14 minutes 3 minutes 1877. The heavy door swung open. Inside lay a rosewood box. She lifted the lid and the hawthorn wreath gleamed like a captured constellation. Emeralds, rubies, and the central diamond, Catherine's diamond, blazed with cold fire. "Perfect," Lady Evelyn breathed. "Photograph it," Puro commanded Sergeant Meadows, the local constable who had arrived on skis. "Then lock it away. Briggs will stand guard. No one enters." The safe was relocked. The timeline was set. The wreath was secure, or so it seemed. The day passed in a blur of tension. Lunch was eaten in silence. Guests wandered the house like ghosts. Puro kept watch, his senses prickling. At 11:45 p.m., just 15 minutes before the midnight unveiling, Puro went to the library. Briggs stood at the door, immovable. "Any movement, Briggs?" "Not a soul, sir." "Quiet as a crypt." Puro nodded and entered. He spun the dial. He opened the safe. The rosewood box was there. He lifted the lid. It was empty. In place of the jewels lay a single sprig of holly, berries glistening, and a note. "The crown is claimed. Merry Christmas." Puro stared for a single heartbeat. Then he saw it. The tapestry behind the safe had been slit from the inside. A hidden panel stood ajar, revealing a priest's hole leading to the minstrel's gallery. He rushed out to the balcony overlooking the great hall. The clock began to toll midnight. Below, the family was gathering for the ceremony, unaware that their prize was gone. Lady Evelyn opened the library door from the hall side. She crossed to the safe, spun the dial, and opened the box in front of everyone. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. "Gone!" Clarissa shrieked. "Julian, this is your doing." "Me," Julian shouted. "I was locked in my room." Chaos erupted. Accusations flew like shrapnel. Captain Hargreaves raised his cane as if to strike Felix. "Silence!" Puro's voice cut through the din like a blade. He stepped down the stairs, holding up a key. "The wreath is gone, but it has not left the house. The snow prevents escape. The thief is among us." He held up a duplicate key he had found in the secret tunnel. This was used. The original never left Briggs. Therefore, the thief had access to the library between 10 a.m. and now. Who can account for every minute of that time? The room fell deadly silent. Puro looked from face to face. Julian's defiance, Clarissa's calculation, Felix's smirk, Miss Frost's terror. "One among you has orchestrated a charade," Puro declared. "The anonymous letters, the holly berries, the masked assault, all to create confusion. But you have made one mistake. You forgot that Hercu Puro sees everything." He knelt by the pedestal. A single holly berry had rolled onto the floor. "The juice is still wet," he whispered. "The theft is 30 minutes old. Close the doors. No one leaves this room." The drawing room of Willowbrook Manor was a pressure cooker. The fire roared, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. 14 people sat in a semicircle, the empty rosewood box sitting on a table like an altar to betrayal. Hercu Puro stood before the hearth. "The Hawthorne Wreath has vanished," he began. "I will now establish who could not have taken it." He methodically dismantled their alibis. Briggs was at the door. Lady Evelyn was with Mrs. Finch. But as he probed, cracks appeared. "Miss Frost," Puro said, turning to the trembling secretary, "you carried the silver salver for the ceremony. Did you not notice the weight?" I thought it was the candlesticks," she stammered. "And the anonymous letters," Puro continued, pulling the notes from his pocket. "Written on paper scented with coal tar soap. The soap found in your room, mademoiselle." Miss Frost gasped. "You have been embezzling from the estate accounts, have you not? Small sums, but enough to require a cover-up. You intended to sell the wreath to hide your theft." "No," she cried. "I didn't steal it." "Then explain the duplicate key," Puro pressed. "Made from a wax impression, taken when you brought Briggs his cocoa." The room was paralyzed. Miss Frost looked ready to faint. "But where is the wreath?" Lady Evelyn demanded. "Search her room." "Unnecessary," Puro said calmly. The thief is clever. They would not hide emeralds in a shoe. They would hide them where they would disappear. Puro walked to the massive Christmas tree in the corner. Its branches were heavy with glass ornaments and tinsel. He reached up to the very top near the star. Nestled among the glass icicles was the Hawthorne Wreath. He lifted it down. The holly berries threaded through the silver stems blended perfectly with the tree. It was the perfect hiding place, hidden in plain sight. Miss Frost placed it there, Puro announced, intending to retrieve it later. Miss Frost collapsed into a chair, weeping. I only wanted to be free. 7 years of ledgers. Sergeant Meadows stepped forward with handcuffs. The mystery seemed solved. The wreath was returned to Lady Evelyn, who cradled it like a child. It is over, Lady Evelyn sighed. Thank you, Monsieur Puro. Indeed, Puro said. He watched Miss Frost being led away. He watched Julian's relief, Felix's amusement. But as the family dispersed to bed, exhausted and relieved, Puro remained by the fire. He held the wreath in his hands, examining it under the gas light. He frowned. He took a jeweler's loupe from his pocket and peered at the central diamond. Curious, he whispered to the empty room. He went to the window. The snow had stopped. He looked back at the wreath glittering on the table. The little gray cells are not satisfied, he murmured. Miss Frost is a thief, yes, but she is not the thief. He picked up the wreath. It felt light, too light. The game was not over. In fact, the true deception had only just been revealed. Dawn crept over Willowbrook Manor, pale and reluctant. Miss Frost was in custody, and the Hawthorne wreath was back in the safe. But Hercu Puro was awake, standing on the landing before a portrait of an ancestor, Beatrice Hawthorne, painted in 1897. In the painting, Beatrice wore the wreath, but Puro noticed something. The central diamond in the painting was different, older, rougher cut. He went down to breakfast. Lady Evelyn sat alone with the recovered wreath. Madame, Puro said, sitting opposite her, this wreath, it is a fake. Lady Evelyn dropped her toast. What? I examined it last night. The silver bears Venetian hallmarks from the 1890s. The stones are paste. High-quality glass. Lady Evelyn's face went gray. She slumped in her chair. You know. Tell me, Puro commanded. My Aunt Beatrice, she whispered. She had a copy made in 1897 to mock the family. The real wreath was lost, or so we thought. 3 months ago a woman came to me, Sophia de Lauro, Beatrice's granddaughter. She had the real wreath. She offered to switch it back for £50,000. I agreed. I needed the money to save the estate. So the switch happened. Yes, last week, the wreath on the tree, that was the paste copy. Miss Frost stole a fake. And the real one? Puro asked. Sophia took the copy. I put the real one in the safe. Then where is the real one now? Puro asked. He walked to the safe and opened it. He took out the wreath they had recovered from the tree. This is paste, madame. Which means, Sophia switched them again, Lady Evelyn cried. She came back during the chaos last night. She has the real jewels. Just then Briggs burst into the room. Sir, the stables, the motor sled is gone, and Sergeant Meadows has been knocked out. The chase is on, Puro shouted. They rushed to the Rolls-Royce. Briggs drove like a madman, chains biting into the snow. They roared down the drive, following the tracks of the motor sled across the frozen fields. Ahead, a red speck moved against the white. It was the sled tearing toward the woods. A figure in black leathers crouched over the controls. "Faster, Briggs!" Puro yelled. The rolls surged. The sled hit the frozen moat, skidding on the ice. The driver looked back. It was a woman, dark and beautiful. Sophia de Lauro. Suddenly, smoke poured from the sled's engine. It sputtered and died. Sophia leaped off, sprinting for the tree line, clutching a leather satchel. Puro was out of the car before it stopped. He ran through the deep snow, his breath burning in his lungs. He tackled her into a snowbank just as she reached the trees. They rolled in the powder. Sophia fought like a wildcat, but Captain Hargreaves arrived, pinning her down. Puro snatched the satchel. He ripped it open. There, blazing in the morning sun, was the true Hawthorne Wreath. The diamond fired shards of light that hurt the eyes. "You meddling little man," Sophia spat. Puro stood up, brushing snow from his coat. "Mademoiselle, you have style, but you lack honor." He looked at the wreath. "Two thieves, one for greed, one for legacy. The case is closed." Or was it? As they drove back to the manor, Puro noticed something on the floor of the car. A sprig of mistletoe stuck to his boot. He picked it up. A single berry was pierced. He sniffed it. Bitter almonds, cyanide. The theft was solved. But a murderer was still loose in Willowbrook Manor. The true wreath was back in the safe. Sophia de Lauro and Miss Frost were locked away. The house breathed a sigh of relief. It was Christmas Day. But Hercu Puro stood in the conservatory, holding a sprig of mistletoe wrapped in a handkerchief. It smelled of death. He found Briggs polishing the car. "The mistletoe in the conservatory," Puro asked. "Who hung it?" "Miss Frost 3 days ago," Briggs replied. "And who has the key to the conservatory?" "Only me, sir." "And the spare is in the butler's pantry." Puro nodded. He examined the stone bench where Lady Evelyn took her morning coffee. A tiny ring of liquid stained the stone. Someone had placed a poisoned sprig directly above the bench, waiting for a berry to fall into her cup. But Lady Evelyn had changed her routine that morning. She had survived by pure chance. "We have a third villain," Puro told Briggs. "One who wants Lady Evelyn dead." "Who stood to gain?" "Julian, the heir." "Clarissa, who wanted freedom." Or perhaps Captain Hargreaves, desperate for money. Puro devised a trap. That night, the family gathered in the hall for the traditional Christmas toast. Lady Evelyn announced she was retiring early, claiming exhaustion. But in reality, she hid in the shadows of the gallery. Puro watched from the balcony. He had placed a decoy, the paste wreath, around Lady Evelyn's neck before she left. The real one was locked away. The guests mingled. Julian fetched brandy. Clarissa paced. Then Captain Hargreaves approached the sideboard. He poured a cup of black coffee. He walked over to the mistletoe hanging in the main hall. He set the cup down on a small table directly beneath the berries. He looked up at the mistletoe. He looked at the stairs where Lady Evelyn had disappeared. Then he raised the cup. "To absent friends," he whispered. And he lifted the cup to his own lips. "Stop!" Puro shouted, vaulting over the railing. He landed and slapped the cup from the captain's hand. It shattered, dark liquid splashing the floor. "You fool!" Puro cried. "It is poison." "I know," Hargreaves sobbed, collapsing into a chair. "I knew it was poisoned. I was ending it." "Why?" Puro demanded. "I saw Julian take the key," Hargreaves gasped. I thought he meant to kill her for the inheritance. I couldn't let him do it, but I couldn't turn him in. The scandal. I thought if I died it would stop. Julian stepped forward, white-faced. I took the key to check the safe, I swear. I never touched the mistletoe. Puro looked at the broken cup. He looked at the weeping captain and the terrified Julian. The captain is innocent of murder, Puro declared. He is guilty only of despair. And Julian is a fool but not a killer. Then who? Lady Evelyn asked, stepping from the shadows. Puro turned to the group. His eyes locked on one person standing by the window, a man who had been reciting poetry all weekend. The poisoner, Puro said, his voice cold as the grave, is the one who knows that mistletoe dries out when it is cut. The one who needed to silence you, madame, to force the sale of the wreath. He pointed a finger. Mr. Peregrine Quill. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Mr. Peregrine Quill, the poet with the monocle, took a step back. Me, Quill stammered. This is preposterous. Is it? Puro walked toward him. You were seen leaving the conservatory yesterday with green stains on your cuffs. You claimed you were gathering ivy. But the ivy grows in the kitchen garden. You are planting the poisoned sprig. Conjecture, Quill snapped. Connection, Puro corrected. You are not just a poet, monsieur. You are Peregrine Quilloch, former curator of the Venetian Museum, and you are the uncle of Sophia de Lauro. The room gasped. Sophia, struggling in her handcuffs near the door, shouted something in Italian. You plotted together, Puro continued. She to steal the wreath, you to ensure the sale. You knew Julian had refused to help Sophia, but you kept his letters to blackmail him. You poisoned the mistletoe hoping Lady Evelyn would die, forcing the estate to be liquidated and the wreath to be sold to your dealer. Lies, Quill yelled. I have the letter, Puro lied smoothly, tapping his pocket. Found in Sophia's satchel, a letter from you detailing the dosage. Quill's face crumbled. The arrogance vanished, replaced by the snarl of a cornered rat. He lunged for the fireplace poker. Briggs was faster. He tackled the poet, pinning him to the rug. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Quill wheezed. We just wanted the jewels. They belong to our family, not hers. They belong to history, Lady Evelyn said, stepping forward. She looked down at the man who had tried to kill her. And now you belong to the police. Order was restored. The three thieves, Miss Frost, Sophia, and Quill, were all in custody. Captain Hargreaves was being treated by the doctor. He would survive his moment of madness. Puro stood by the fireplace. He held a small glass vial containing the cyanide berries he had harvested from the conservatory. He handed it to Sergeant Meadows. Destroy this, and burn the mistletoe. The guests began to disperse, shaken and exhausted. The nightmare was finally over. Lady Evelyn approached Puro. She held the paste wreath in her hands. You have saved my life, Hercu, and my soul. What can I possibly offer you? Puro smiled. The truth, madame, it is the only jewel worth possessing. She pressed the fake wreath into his hands. Then take this, a reminder that even a forgery can tell a story. Puro bowed. But as he looked out the window, he saw the snow plow finally arriving from Oxford. The road was open. The mystery is solved, Puro whispered. But the departure, that is always the hardest part. Welcome back to Whisper Theory for the conclusion of the Hawthorne Wreath. The Oxford plough arrived at 2 p.m. on Boxing Day, carving a path through the white isolation of Willowbrook Manor. Hercu Puro stood on the steps, his coat buttoned against the biting wind. The household was gathered to see him off. Julian and Clarissa stood together, no longer rivals but survivors. Captain Hargreaves sat in a chair, pale but alive. Lady Evelyn stood tall, the true wreath locked safely away, destined for a museum where it could no longer hurt anyone. "You leave us poorer in mystery, monsieur," Lady Evelyn said, "but richer in clarity." "Willowbrook will not forget," she added. "Nor will Hercu Puro," he replied. "I shall remember the goose, the snow, and the mistletoe that nearly proved fatal." He climbed into the Rolls-Royce. As the car pulled away, he watched the manor shrink in the rearview mirror until the trees swallowed it whole. At the station, Puro boarded the train to London. He settled into his seat, the compartment warm and quiet. He opened his notebook for the final entry. Conclusion: true wreath saved. Paste wreath kept as souvenir. 3 thieves. Frost driven by greed, Sophia driven by legacy, Quill driven by desperation. Saved by a change of habit. Moral: even Christmas cannot escape order. He closed the book. He took a small tin of crystallized violets from his pocket and popped one into his mouth. The train gathered speed, the snowy fields blurring into a watercolor of white and gray. Back at Baker Street, his flat was warm. George took his coat. "A productive journey, sir." "Exhausting, George. The English aristocracy is more dangerous than a snake pit." Puro placed the paste wreath on his mantelpiece, right next to a bust of Napoleon. It glittered in the lamplight, fake jewels shining with real history. He poured himself a cup of thick, hot chocolate. He sat in his chair, crossing his legs with that familiar precision. The wind still howled outside, but inside there was peace. The puzzle was solved. The pieces were back in their box. Puro raised his cup in a silent toast. "To Christmas," he whispered, "to wreaths of holly and wreaths of lies, and to the little gray cells that untangle them both." And so ends the mystery of the Hawthorne Wreath. But the files of Hercu Puro are vast, and the shadows of London are deep. Join us next time on Whisper Theory, where the truth is always just one deduction away. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep the mystery alive. Good night.